When I admitted that I was having a hard time, the whole family turned their faces away. 6 weeks later, at a parents' party, I shared proof of their chat and phone calls. I've never gone broke. I'm just testing who's sincere. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Ethan. I'm 34 years old, and for most of my life, I believed I had something a lot of people wish they had. A family that always had each other's backs. At least, that's what we said. If you asked my parents what mattered most, they'd answer without even thinking. Family comes first. If you asked my older brother, he'd tell you, money comes and goes. Family stays. My sister loved saying, no matter what happens, we're all in this together. I'd heard those lines so many times growing up that they almost sounded like our family motto. And honestly, I never questioned it. Every birthday, every barbecue, every holiday dinner looked the same. Too much food. Too many people talking over each other. My mom making sure everyone had enough to eat. My dad standing by the grill like it was his personal kingdom. The cousins chasing kids around the backyard. The adults laughing loud enough for the neighbors to hear. From the outside, we looked like one of those families people secretly envied. The kind that always showed up. The kind that stayed close. Or at least, that's what I thought. A few months before everything happened, my parents hosted one of our usual Sunday cookouts. Nothing special. Just an excuse for everyone to get together. I remember carrying a bowl of pasta salad into the backyard when I spotted my cousin Noah unloading folding chairs from the garage. Noah was 2 years younger than me. Quiet, easygoing. The type of person who never needed to be the center of attention. He worked full-time at a warehouse across town. Nothing glamorous, no big salary, no fancy title. He rented a small apartment, drove an old pickup that made strange noises every time he parked. And somehow, that made him the unofficial disappointment of the family. Nobody ever said those exact words to his face. They didn't have to. "You still driving that thing?" my brother joked, pointing at Noah's truck. "It has more birthdays than my oldest kid." Everyone laughed. Noah smiled. "It still gets me to work." "Maybe one day you'll finally upgrade," my sister added while sipping her drink. "When I win the lottery," Noah answered with a little shrug. That got another laugh. He never sounded defensive, never angry. He had this habit of letting comments roll right past him. At first, I admired that. I thought he just didn't care. Later, I started wondering if he'd simply gotten used to it. The jokes kept coming throughout the afternoon. Someone teased him about wearing the same watch he'd had for years. Someone else asked if he was ever going to find a real career. Even my dad chimed in. "Noah's rich in patience? That's for sure." More laughter. Noah just grinned and kept stacking chairs. A few minutes later, I walked into the kitchen to grab more ice. Noah was already inside washing dishes. Nobody had asked him to. He was just doing it. "You don't have to clean up," I told him. He looked over his shoulder. "Your mom's been cooking since this morning." He rinsed another plate. "I can spend 15 minutes helping." That was Noah. He never made a speech about kindness. He just quietly did things. When dinner was finally over, everyone slowly drifted toward the living room. My parents started talking about how lucky we all were. My mom smiled around the room. "I know families who don't even speak anymore." Dad nodded. "We're different. We take care of each other." Everyone agreed. Glasses lifted, heads nodded. It felt warm, comforting, familiar. Then I glanced through the window. Outside, Noah was folding tables by himself. Again, nobody noticed, or maybe they did. They just assumed he'd handle it. I stepped outside to help him. "You missed dessert," I said. He laughed. "There'll be leftovers." Together, we carried the last table into the garage. When we finished, he dusted off his hands and smiled. "Your parents throw a good party." "They do." After a second, I asked, "Does it ever bother you? The jokes?" He looked surprised. Then he shrugged. "They don't mean any harm." "You sure?" He thought about it for a moment. "I've learned something." "What's that?" "It's easier to let people underestimate you than spend your life trying to convince them they're wrong." He smiled like it wasn't a big deal. Then he changed the subject and asked about my job. That conversation stayed with me much longer than I expected. Driving home that night, I kept replaying the afternoon in my head. Not the laughter, not the food, not even the jokes. What I couldn't stop thinking about was how easily everyone talked about loyalty, while the one person doing the most for everyone else was the same person they quietly looked down on. For the first time, those family sayings didn't sound as solid as they used to. And somewhere during that drive, a question slipped into my mind that refused to leave. What if one of us actually needed help? Not someday, not in theory, for real. Would everyone who talked about family still show up? Or did we only believe that because no one had ever put it to the test? I couldn't shake that question for days. It followed me to work. It stayed with me while I was making dinner. Even when I was watching TV, my mind kept drifting back to the same thought. Everyone in my family said they would be there if someone needed help. But nobody had actually needed help in a long time. At least, not publicly. I wasn't interested in proving anyone was a bad person. I wasn't looking for an excuse to cut people off. I just wanted to know if those words actually meant something. One Saturday morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee that had already gone cold. I grabbed my phone, typed a message, deleted it, typed another one, deleted that too. This wasn't as easy as I'd imagined. Lying, even for a reason I thought was important, made me uncomfortable. I almost gave up. Then I remembered Noah quietly washing dishes while everyone else talked about loyalty. That image kept coming back. So I started writing one more time. I kept it simple. I wanted to let everyone know something before you hear it from someone else. My contract isn't being renewed. I'm okay for now because I have some savings. But if I don't find another job within a month, I might have to sell the house. I'm staying positive. Just wanted to be honest with everyone. I read it at least 10 times. There wasn't a single sentence asking for money. No request for a loan. No hint that anyone owed me anything. Just information. Something I figured family should probably know. Before I could overthink it again, I hit send. The message went to my parents, my brother, Ryan, my sister, Melissa, a couple of aunts, an uncle, 3 cousins, including Noah. I set my phone on the table and leaned back. That was it. Nothing else to do. For a few minutes, the apartment felt strangely quiet. I started cleaning the kitchen just to keep my hands busy. About 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Not a call. Just reactions in the family group chat. A praying hands emoji. A sad face. One cousin wrote, "Sorry to hear that." Another said, "You'll land on your feet." Short messages. Polite messages. The kind of responses you'd leave on someone's social media post. I thanked everyone and put my phone down again. An hour passed, then another. Nobody asked what happened. Nobody asked if I wanted company. Nobody asked how I was actually handling it. I told myself not to judge too quickly. People had jobs, families, weekend plans. Maybe they were waiting until they had more time. By lunchtime, I almost laughed at myself. Maybe this whole idea had been ridiculous from the beginning. Maybe everyone would call later that evening. To distract myself, I went grocery shopping. It felt oddly normal. I was buying vegetables and cereal while half my family supposedly believed I might lose my home. Standing in line at the checkout, I caught myself checking my phone again. Nothing. On the drive home, I thought about sending another message with more details, then I stopped myself. That would change the test. If someone cared enough, they wouldn't need extra hints. They'd ask. Back at the apartment, I started answering a few work emails. Ironically, I was doing perfectly fine. My contract hadn't ended. My paycheck was still arriving every 2 weeks. The mortgage was current. Everything I'd told them was fictional. Still, waiting for those calls made the silence feel surprisingly real. I hadn't expected that part. Around dinner time, my neighbor, Mrs. Carter, knocked on my door. "I made too much chili," she said, holding out a container. "You mind helping me finish it?" I smiled. "Thanks." We talked for 10 minutes in the hallway. She asked how work was going. I almost laughed at the timing. "Busy," I answered. Technically, it wasn't even a lie. As she walked away, I caught myself thinking how interesting it was that someone who knew almost nothing about my life had checked on me more recently than most of my relatives. If you're enjoying the story so far, let me know where you're watching from. I'm always curious how far these stories travel. That evening, I placed my phone face down on the coffee table. I told myself I'd stop staring at it every 5 minutes. If someone wanted to reach me, they would. I had barely finished that thought when the screen lit up. The ringtone echoed across the room. I picked up the phone. Mom was calling. I answered before the second ring. "Hey, Mom." "Oh, sweetheart." Her voice immediately softened. "I just saw your message." I leaned against the kitchen counter. "I figured you would." There was a short pause. "I'm sorry you're going through this." "Thanks," she sighed. "You know, things have been difficult for a lot of people lately." I waited. She kept talking. "Your father's pension doesn't stretch as far as it used to. Your aunt has been helping your cousin with daycare. Even your sister says everything costs twice what it did a few years ago." I listened quietly. None of what she said was wrong. Life had gotten more expensive. People had responsibilities. But I noticed something. She was explaining everyone else's situation before asking about mine. "So," she finally said, "have you started applying anywhere?" I updated my resume. "Good. You can't be picky right now." "I know. Even if it's not what you really want, a job is a job." "I understand." Her tone stayed calm, almost instructional, like she was helping me solve a practical problem. Then I heard my dad's voice somewhere in the background. "Put me on." Mom laughed lightly. "Your father wants to talk?" A second later, his voice came through. "Son." "Hey, Dad. I heard about the contract." "Yeah. Tough break." "It is." He didn't waste time. "You need to move fast." "I plan to." "Don't sit around waiting for the perfect opportunity." "I'm not. I worked construction one summer after getting laid off." He chuckled. "Wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills." "I remember you telling me that. So if somebody offers work, even temporary, take it." "I will." He sounded exactly like my father always had. Practical, straightforward, never dramatic. For a moment, I almost forgot why I'd started this whole experiment. This felt normal, comforting even. Then the conversation drifted toward gas prices. A neighbor he'd run into that morning, the weather, little things. I kept waiting for one question, just one. "Do you need anything? Should we come by? Are you okay being alone?" It never came. Instead, Dad said, "You'll figure it out." "I always do." "I know." Mom came back on the line. "We'll be praying for you." "I appreciate that. Keep us updated." "I will." "Love you." "Love you too." The call ended. I stared at the dark screen for a few seconds before setting my phone on the table. The apartment was quiet again. I wasn't angry. That surprised me. I was conflicted. My parents had called. That counted for something. They hadn't ignored me. They cared enough to check in. But the conversation felt like talking to someone at a career center. Helpful advice, reasonable suggestions, very little curiosity. No one asked how I was sleeping, whether I'd told my mortgage company, whether I had groceries, whether I wanted company. Nothing beyond the problem itself. I caught myself trying to defend them. Maybe they didn't want to embarrass me. Maybe they assumed I'd ask if I needed help. Maybe this was just their generation. They believed in solving problems, not talking about feelings. That explanation made sense, at least partly. I decided not to jump to conclusions. The point wasn't to keep score after one phone call. I still had plenty of family members who hadn't responded yet. My brother Ryan was usually the first person to brag about looking out for everyone. Whenever someone complimented him for being successful, he'd smile and say, "That's what family is for." If anyone was going to step up, I honestly thought it would be him. Melissa, my older sister, had a softer personality. She remembered birthdays. She mailed Christmas cards. She checked on people after surgeries. Maybe she'd want to come over just to talk. That thought lifted my mood more than I expected. I made dinner, answered a couple of work emails that no one in my family knew were completely real, and tried to stay off my phone. Around 9, I noticed the family group chat had gone back to normal. My aunt shared pictures of her new puppy. Someone joked about a football game. Ryan reacted with laughing emojis. Melissa commented on a restaurant she'd been wanting to try. The conversation flowed like my message from that morning had already become old news. I read through it once, then locked my phone. Maybe people processed things differently. Maybe they didn't want to overwhelm me all at once. Maybe tomorrow would look different. I wasn't expecting miracles, just something that felt a little more personal. As if on cue, my phone vibrated across the coffee table. The screen lit up with a familiar name, Ryan. Ryan's name flashed across my screen. I smiled without realizing it. Out of everyone in the family, he was the one I expected the most. My older brother had built a successful construction company over the last decade. He was busy all the time, but he also loved telling people that success meant nothing if you couldn't share it with family. I'd heard him say that more times than I could count. I answered, "Hey, little brother." His voice was upbeat, almost rushed. "I just heard about the job." "Yeah, man, that's rough." It wasn't exactly what I planned. I bet. I could hear traffic in the background. A car door slammed. Someone called his name. "You at work?" I asked. "Always." He laughed. "I'm putting out about 20 fires today." I figured. There was a pause. "So what's the plan?" "I'm updating applications." "Good. You'll bounce back." "I hope so." "I know so." His confidence almost made me feel better. Then he said, "Listen, I really can't talk right now." "No problem. But let's catch up tonight." "Sure. I'll give you a call after everything settles down." "Sounds good. We'll figure something out." "Thanks. Hang in there." The call ended. I looked at the screen for a second before setting the phone down. It hadn't been a long conversation. Still, it felt more personal than the group chat messages. He'd promised to call back. That counted for something. So I waited. I made dinner, watched half of a baseball game without paying attention to the score. Around 9:30, I glanced at my phone. Nothing. 10 o'clock came. Still nothing. I finally went to bed, telling myself he'd probably gotten caught up with work. The next morning, there wasn't a missed call. No text saying, "Sorry, I got home late." Nothing at all. I didn't bring it up. People forget. Life gets busy. I knew all the excuses because I started making them for him before he had the chance. Melissa finally replied around lunchtime, not with a phone call, just a text. "I'm sorry you're dealing with this. I hope something comes through soon." I answered almost immediately. "Thanks, I'm trying to stay positive." A minute later, she reacted with a heart emoji. That was it. The conversation ended before it really started. Over the next few days, I sent her a couple of normal messages. Nothing dramatic. I asked how my niece's soccer tournament had gone. She answered. I asked if she and the kids were doing okay. She said they were busy but good. Whenever I hinted at my own situation, the conversation seemed to lose momentum. She'd either change the subject or disappear for hours before replying with something short. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I wasn't. One evening, she texted, "Sorry, crazy day." Another time it was, "I'll text you later." Later never came. I wasn't looking for someone to solve my problems. A 15-minute conversation would have been enough. Instead, everything stayed on the surface. The strange part was that nobody acted uncomfortable in the family group chat. If anything, everyone seemed more active than usual. My aunt shared pictures from a weekend flea market. Dad posted a photo of the tomatoes growing in his backyard. Ryan joked about accidentally locking his keys inside one of his work trucks. Melissa uploaded pictures of my niece holding a participation trophy. Everyone commented, everyone laughed. The conversation kept moving. I scrolled back to the message where I'd explained that I might have to sell my house. It was only a few days old, yet it already felt like it belonged to a different conversation. No one asked for updates. No one said, "Any interviews yet?" No one checked whether I'd made my mortgage payment. The topic had simply disappeared. That bothered me more than I expected. Not because I wanted attention, because ignoring it almost seemed intentional. I started noticing little things I probably would have overlooked before. Ryan posted about buying new equipment for one of his job sites. Melissa talked excitedly about planning a weekend trip with friends. Mom reminded everyone about Dad's upcoming anniversary lunch. The chat was full of energy, just not when it came to me. I kept telling myself not to read too much into it. Maybe everyone assumed I'd reach out if things got worse. Maybe that was normal. Maybe I was the one creating expectations nobody had agreed to. Then another notification appeared. Mom had sent a message to the family group. Don't forget next Sunday's anniversary lunch. I made reservations for everyone. Underneath was a list of names. Dad, Mom, Ryan and his family, Melissa and her family, my aunt, 2 cousins, Noah. I read the list once, then again. My name wasn't there. I stared at the list for another minute, convinced I'd simply missed my name. I hadn't. Everyone else had been included, even Noah. I closed the chat and reopened it. Same list, same names, still no Ethan. For a second, I wondered if Mom had accidentally left me off. She wasn't exactly known for being great with her phone. So instead of assuming the worst, I called Ryan. He answered on the 3rd ring. What's up? Hey, quick question. Sure. I saw Mom's message about the anniversary lunch. Yeah. I don't think she put my name on the reservation. There was a pause. Not a long one. Just long enough for me to notice it. Oh, I think we all figured you probably wouldn't come. I frowned. Why? Well, he cleared his throat. You've got the job situation. I figured you'd be busy. Busy. Looking for work, interviews, stuff like that. I wasn't even asked. I know. His voice sounded careful now. We just didn't want to put extra pressure on you. I let that sit for a second. You could have invited me? Yeah, I guess we could have. Neither of us said anything for a moment. Then Ryan tried to lighten the mood. Once everything settles down, we'll all get together. Sure. I've got to jump into a meeting. I understand. We'll talk soon. Okay? The call ended. I kept looking at the phone. Something about that conversation didn't feel right. Ryan wasn't rude, he wasn't cruel, but it felt like he'd been searching for an explanation while we were talking, as if the decision had already been made and he was trying to find words that sounded reasonable. I thought about texting Mom, then decided against it. If she wanted me there, she already knew how to reach me. That Sunday, I stayed home. Around noon, pictures started appearing in the family chat. Dad smiling with a slice of cake, my niece making a funny face. Ryan standing beside the grill. Melissa holding a glass of iced tea. Someone had even posted a group photo. I counted the faces. Everyone looked relaxed. Nobody mentioned that I wasn't there. Not one message saying, "We missed you." Not even, "Hope you're doing okay?" I set my phone down and went outside to mow my lawn. It sounds silly, but pushing a lawnmower back and forth was easier than sitting there thinking about it. My neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, waved from across the street. "Haven't seen your family around lately." I smiled. "They've been busy." He nodded. "Happens." That was the whole conversation. Oddly enough, it felt less awkward than most of the conversations I'd had with my own relatives that week. A few days passed. Work went on as usual. I still woke up every morning, drove to the office, and spent the day pretending nothing unusual was happening. Nobody there knew I'd invented this story. Every evening, I'd come home and check my phone. There would be new messages, just never the ones I expected. Mom sent recipes. Dad complained about the weather. Ryan shared pictures from another job site. Melissa posted about my nephew losing another tooth. Life kept moving. My supposed crisis barely existed anymore. The strangest part wasn't that nobody offered money. That had never been the point. It was that nobody seemed curious. No one asked if I'd had interviews. No one asked if I'd needed to dip into savings. No one asked if I was eating okay. No one ever said, "Mind if I stop by?" I started replaying old family conversations in my head. Every time someone had proudly said, "We're always there for each other." Had I just been hearing what I wanted to hear? Or had everyone believed it, until helping became inconvenient? I still wasn't ready to judge them. Maybe people simply didn't know what to say. Maybe they thought giving me space was respectful. I kept giving them the benefit of the doubt, because once you stop believing the best about your family, it's hard to get that belief back. One evening, I came home carrying takeout after another completely normal workday. The house was quiet. I kicked off my shoes, set the food on the kitchen counter, and reached for a glass. Before I could pour myself a drink, someone knocked on the front door. 3 slow knocks, not loud, not hesitant, just steady. I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked to the door, looked through the peephole, and froze for a second. Standing on my porch was Noah, holding 2 grocery bags. I opened the door. Noah? He smiled like showing up unannounced wasn't a big deal. Hey! He lifted the grocery bags a little. I was already on this side of town. I looked at the bags, then back at him. Were you? He grinned. Not really. That made me laugh for the first time in days. You gonna leave me standing out here? Sorry, come in. He stepped inside and set the bags on the kitchen counter. I peeked inside one of them. Pasta, ground beef, bread, eggs, a couple cans of soup, coffee. Nothing fancy, just everyday groceries. You didn't have to do this? I know. He shrugged. I wanted to. I was about to explain that I still had food in the house, but I caught myself. That would have defeated the point. Instead, I asked, can I at least pay you back? No. Noah. No. He smiled again. You can cook dinner. I looked at the groceries. I guess that's fair. For the next half hour, we stood in my kitchen making spaghetti like we'd done it 100 times before. He chopped onions. I browned the meat. At one point, he looked around and said, you keep this place cleaner than I keep mine. I've got too much free time. He laughed. I don't believe that. The conversation wandered everywhere except the subject I expected. We talked about baseball, a movie he'd watched the week before, his truck finally making it through another inspection, a neighbor who kept stealing everyone's newspaper by mistake. It felt normal, and I realized something. Noah wasn't pretending my situation didn't exist. He just wasn't making it the only thing about me. That mattered more than I expected. We finally sat down with 2 bowls of spaghetti. He took one bite. Not bad. That's high praise coming from someone who burns toast. I burned toast one time. It was impressive. He laughed so hard he nearly dropped his fork. For a little while, everything felt surprisingly easy. Then the conversation slowed. Noah rested his fork on the plate. So, I looked up. How are you really doing? Not, how's the job search? Not, any interviews? Just, how are you? I took a second before answering. I'm okay. He tilted his head. You don't sound convinced. I've had better weeks. I figured. There wasn't any pressure in his voice, no attempt to solve anything. He simply waited. I appreciated that more than advice. I keep thinking I'll hear from someone, I admitted. I mean, really hear from them. He nodded slowly. I know that feeling. You do? Yeah. He leaned back in his chair. A few years ago, the warehouse cut staff. I lost my job with almost no warning. I hadn't known that. You never mentioned it. There wasn't much to say. What happened? He let out a quiet breath. I spent about 3 months looking for work. Were things bad? They could have been worse. He smiled faintly. But they were lonely. I didn't interrupt. At first, everybody checked in. He looked down at his plate. Then the calls got farther apart. The texts got shorter. People assumed I was either busy or embarrassed. Eventually, they just stopped asking. He looked back at me. I don't think most people mean to disappear. They just don't know what to do once the problem lasts longer than a few days. That landed harder than I expected, because it sounded exactly like what I was living through. I guess I never realized. I didn't either. He smiled. Until it happened, we cleared the dishes together. I reached for the sink. He reached for the dish towel. Without saying anything, we fell into a rhythm. Wash, dry, put everything away. It reminded me of my parents' cookout. Just the 2 of us cleaning while everyone else had been talking. You know, I said, you're always the one helping. He shrugged. I've got 2 hands. So does everybody else? He chuckled. Guess mine get volunteered more often. There wasn't any bitterness behind the joke, just honesty. When everything was cleaned up, we walked toward the front door. I honestly thought he was about to leave. Instead, he stopped. He looked down at the grocery bags he'd brought in, then reached into the side pocket of his backpack. His expression changed. Not nervous, just thoughtful. I almost forgot. He pulled out a plain white envelope and held it in his hand. I brought something else. Noah held the envelope out to me. I didn't reach for it. What's that? Just take it. I laughed awkwardly. That answer usually makes me nervous. It'll make more sense if you open it. I took the envelope and looked inside. My smile disappeared. There was cash, a gift card, and a small folded note. I looked back up at him. Noah. He rubbed the back of his neck. It's not a fortune. I counted it quickly without meaning to. $900 in cash. A grocery gift card worth $400. I looked at him like he'd lost his mind. You can't be serious. I am. I immediately tried to hand it back. No. He didn't even lift his hand. I'm not taking this. Yes, you are. Noah, this is way too much. It isn't. It is for you. He smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile people use when they're joking. I've been saving it? Exactly. So keep saving it. He leaned against the doorway. Ethan, I know you. You'd do the same for me. The words caught me off guard because he was right. If I truly believed someone I cared about was about to lose their home, I'd do whatever I could. Still, this is your emergency fund. He nodded. I know. What if something happens to you? I'll build it back. You shouldn't have to, and neither should you. For a second, neither of us said anything. I looked down at the envelope again. The bills inside weren't crisp. Some looked like they'd been sitting in a drawer for a long time. This wasn't money he'd casually pulled from his checking account. This was money he'd protected, little by little, month after month. You've really been saving this? He nodded. I started almost a year ago. What for? He laughed quietly. I didn't really know. I just figured everybody needs something put away for a rainy day. He paused. I guess I found mine. That hit me harder than I expected. Not because of the amount, because I knew what it represented. Hours of overtime, skipping things he wanted, choosing the cheaper option over and over again. All so one day he'd have a little security. And now he was offering it to me without hesitation. I can't. You can. Noah. He interrupted me gently. I'm not trying to rescue you. I'm just trying to make sure you don't carry everything by yourself. He pointed toward the grocery bag still sitting on the counter. The food won't fix your problems. The money won't either. But maybe it'll help you sleep a little better. His voice stayed calm. You'd be surprised what a little breathing room can do. I looked away for a second. Of all the people in my family, Noah had the least to spare. Yet he was the only one standing in my house. The only one who'd driven across town. The only one who'd asked how I was actually doing. The only one trying to lighten the load. Not with speeches, with actions. I finally folded the envelope closed. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I'll pay you back. He chuckled. If it makes you feel better, sure. But that's not why I'm giving it to you. I walked him to the door. Before stepping outside, he looked back. Promise me one thing. What? If things get worse, he hesitated. Don't disappear. What do you mean? I did. When I lost my job, I stopped answering people. I thought I was protecting my pride. It only made everything feel smaller. I nodded. I won't. Good, he smiled. And if you just need someone to complain to, I make a pretty good listener. I've noticed. He laughed, climbed into his old pickup, and drove away. I stood on the porch until his taillights disappeared around the corner. Then I went back inside. The house felt different. Not because of the envelope, because someone had walked into it without being asked. I placed the cash and gift card back inside the envelope exactly as he'd handed them to me. Then I sat down at my dining table with my laptop. For the first time since sending that message to my family, I opened every text, every missed call, every voicemail, every conversation. I started putting them in order, one by one. The dining table slowly disappeared beneath sheets of paper. Not because I was trying to build a case against anyone, I just wanted to see everything in one place. My phone sat beside my laptop while I scrolled back through every conversation from the day I'd sent that message. I grabbed a legal pad and drew 3 simple columns. Called, checked in, showed up, that was it. Nothing complicated. Mom and Dad went into the first column. They had called. Ryan went there too. He'd called once and promised another conversation that never happened. Melissa's name landed somewhere between a text message and silence. She'd responded, technically. But every conversation seemed to end before it really started. I kept going. One aunt sent a prayer emoji. An uncle wrote, "Things always work out." One cousin reacted with a thumbs up. Another never replied at all. Then I reached Noah. I didn't even know which column fit him. He had called once, texted twice, stopped by my house, brought groceries, cooked dinner with me, asked how I was doing, listened, then tried to hand me almost everything he'd managed to save. One name, completely different pattern. I leaned back in my chair. The contrast wasn't dramatic because anyone had been cruel. That was the strange part. Nobody had insulted me. Nobody told me I deserved it. Nobody slammed a door in my face. Most of them had simply stayed at a comfortable distance. Looking at the page made something clear. Ignoring someone isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks polite. Sometimes it sounds like, "Hang in there." Sometimes it's saying all the right words while never changing your schedule by even 15 minutes. I closed the notebook. For a while, I honestly thought that was enough. I'd gotten my answer. There wasn't any reason to take it further. The experiment had served its purpose. I could move on and simply adjust my expectations. That seemed like the mature thing to do. A few evenings later, Mom called. Not about my supposed job search. She wanted to ask whether I preferred chocolate cake or carrot cake for their upcoming anniversary celebration. "We're expecting everybody," she said cheerfully. "Dad wants to keep it simple this year." I smiled to myself. Simple never stays simple in our family. She laughed. "That's true?" We talked for a couple of minutes about decorations, relatives who were traveling in, and whether the weather would cooperate. Then we hung up. I stared at the phone. It struck me that we'd spent several minutes planning a celebration without her asking how my financial situation had changed. Not once. That wasn't anger I felt, it was confusion. How had everyone become so comfortable stepping around the subject? A few days later, Ryan posted pictures of a new company truck. The comments filled up quickly. "Looks great! Congratulations! You deserve it." Melissa uploaded photos from my nephew's birthday party. More comments, more excitement. Life was moving along exactly as before. My message about possibly losing my house had vanished beneath recipes, birthday pictures, football scores, and funny memes. I found myself opening the notebook again. This time, I wasn't looking at names. I was looking at actions. Who made time? Who made excuses? Who made assumptions? Who actually crossed my front doorstep? The answer never changed. One evening, I almost threw the notebook into a drawer. "This is ridiculous," I said out loud to an empty room. "No one's going to benefit from this." I picked it up again 5 minutes later, because another thought had started bothering me. What if my family genuinely believed they had been supportive? What if, in their minds, a quick phone call and a few encouraging words counted as showing up? People rarely judge themselves by what they failed to do. They remember what they did do. That idea stayed with me. It wouldn't leave. I wasn't interested in embarrassing anyone. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want a dramatic argument across the dinner table. I wanted them to see the difference between saying, "We're here for you," and actually being there. The timing almost felt too obvious. My parents' anniversary party was only a couple of weeks away. Every branch of the family would be there. The same people who had heard my message. The same people who had responded or hadn't. I looked over at the envelope Noah had given me. I still hadn't spent a single dollar. It remained exactly where I'd placed it, tucked safely inside a kitchen drawer. It wasn't the money that mattered anymore. It was the reminder of what genuine support looked like. I opened the notebook one last time. Then I printed screenshots of the messages, a copy of my call history, a timeline of who reached out and when. Nothing edited, nothing exaggerated, just the truth. I slid everything into a plain folder and rested my hand on top of it for a second. When my parents' anniversary arrived, that folder was coming with me. By the time my parents' anniversary dinner arrived, the folder was sitting on the passenger seat beside me. I'd thought about leaving it at home, more than once. As I drove across town, I kept asking myself the same question. Was this really necessary? Part of me wanted to forget the whole thing. Smile for a few hours, eat dinner, celebrate my parents, drive home. Life would certainly be easier that way. But every time I reached that conclusion, I remembered Noah standing in my kitchen with his emergency savings in his hand. That memory kept outweighing my doubts. I picked up the folder before getting out of the car, then slid it under my arm. No one noticed. Mom greeted me at the door with a hug. "There you are." I wouldn't miss it. She smiled. "I'm glad." Dad shook my hand before pulling me into a quick hug. "Good to see you, son." "You too." Nothing felt awkward. If anything, everyone acted like we'd seen each other yesterday. Ryan walked over carrying a plate of appetizers. "Hey, hey." He gave me a quick pat on the shoulder. "Good to see you." "You too." Melissa hugged me next. "How've you been?" "Doing okay." "That's good." Then someone called her name from the kitchen, and she disappeared into another conversation before either of us said anything else. I stood there for a second, watching everyone move around the house. The room was loud, kids running through the hallway, my aunt laughing at one of Dad's stories, someone arguing over which football team would make the playoffs. Everything looked exactly like every family gathering we'd ever had. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined the distance over the past several weeks. Then Ryan started telling a story about one of his employees. "It doesn't matter how busy life gets," he said. "You always make time for family." Several heads nodded. Dad lifted his glass. "That's right. Family takes care of family." The sentence hung in the air for a moment. Nobody questioned it. Nobody hesitated. Everyone smiled like it was obviously true. I caught myself looking down at the folder resting beside my chair. It suddenly felt heavier than it actually was. Dinner was served a few minutes later. People filled their plates. Conversations shifted from work to vacations to home repairs. I listened more than I talked. Not because I was upset, because I was paying attention. Mom asked Ryan about a new contract. Dad congratulated Melissa's son on his baseball season. My aunt asked Noah whether his truck was still running. "Barely," he joked. "It still beats a car payment." Everybody laughed. One cousin grinned. "You're the only guy I know who celebrates keeping an old truck alive." Noah laughed with them. "Someone has to." That was the end of it. The conversation moved on. Just like always, he wasn't treated badly, he just wasn't taken seriously. It was subtle, easy to miss unless you'd been looking for it. I watched him get up twice to refill drinks for people. He helped Dad carry extra chairs in from the garage. Later, I noticed him clearing empty plates before anyone asked. The same pattern I'd seen months earlier. Quietly helping, never making a show of it. No one thanked him beyond a casual, "Appreciate it." He smiled anyway. As dessert came out, Mom stood up. "I just want to thank all of you for being here." She looked around the room. "We're lucky. So many families drift apart." She reached over and squeezed Dad's hand. "I'm grateful ours stays close." Everyone raised their glasses. "To family." "To family," the room echoed. I lifted my glass too. From the outside, I looked exactly like everyone else. Inside, I couldn't stop noticing one thing. Not a single person had asked me about my job. Not once. 6 weeks earlier, I'd supposedly been on the edge of selling my house. Now I was sitting at the same table, and somehow my situation had completely disappeared from everyone's minds. No one asked if I'd found work. No one asked whether I'd managed to keep the house. No one even said, "How are things now?" It wasn't hostility, it was something quieter. As if my problem had simply become inconvenient enough to fade away. I looked across the table. Noah caught my eye for a second and smiled. Just a small, genuine smile. He had no idea what was inside the folder beside my chair. And I realized something. Whatever happened next wasn't about embarrassing him. It wasn't even really about exposing anyone else. It was about making one simple truth impossible to ignore. People slowly pushed their empty plates away. The conversations settled into smaller groups. Dad thanked everyone again for coming. The room relaxed. I reached down beside my chair, wrapped my hand around the folder. Then I stood up. "Can I have everyone's attention for just a couple of minutes?" The room gradually quieted down. Conversations faded one by one until everyone was looking at me. Dad smiled. "You making a toast?" "In a way." I held up the folder. "It won't take long." Mom looked curious. Ryan leaned back in his chair. Melissa folded her hands on the table. Even the kids seemed to notice something different was happening. I took a slow breath. "A little over 6 weeks ago, I sent all of you a message." Several people nodded. "The one about your job?" my aunt asked. "Yeah." I opened the folder and pulled out a few printed pages. I've been looking back at what happened after that. Ryan frowned slightly. What do you mean? I kept a record. That got everyone's attention. A record of what? Melissa asked. The calls, the texts, the visits. I wasn't accusing anyone. I kept my voice calm. I wanted to remember who reached out and how. A few people exchanged confused looks. Dad chuckled. You've always been organized. A couple of relatives laughed with him. The laughter faded quickly when they realized I wasn't joking. I laid several pages on the table. Copies of text messages, a timeline, a printed call log. Nothing highlighted, nothing edited, just dates and times. I wasn't counting who gave me the best advice. I wasn't keeping score. I was simply paying attention. Mom looked down at the papers. I don't understand. You will. I glanced around the room. When I told everyone I'd lost my job, I said my savings would only last so long. I said I might have to sell my house. Nobody interrupted. I never asked for money. Several heads nodded. That's true, my uncle said quietly. I never asked anyone to fix my situation. I only wanted to see what people naturally chose to do. Ryan shifted in his chair. Ethan, I raised a hand gently. Just let me finish. He nodded. I continued. Some people sent encouraging messages. I appreciated those. My parents called. I looked toward Mom and Dad. You both checked on me? Mom gave a small, relieved smile. Then I added, but nobody asked if I needed groceries. Nobody asked if they could stop by. Nobody asked if I'd made my mortgage payment. The room became noticeably quieter. I wasn't raising my voice. I didn't need to. The family group chat went back to recipes, football, birthday pictures, and vacation plans. I watched everything move on. I even got left off one family lunch because everyone assumed I was too busy dealing with my problems. Ryan looked down at the table. He stopped. Nobody filled the silence. I turned another page in the folder. Then tonight, I looked around the room again. I realized something. Not one person has asked whether I found another job. A few faces changed. Confusion. Then realization. You've all spent the evening talking with me, but no one asked whether I was okay. Mom slowly covered her mouth with one hand. Melissa stared at her plate. Dad's smile was gone. I closed the folder. There's one more thing. Every eye stayed on me. I never lost my job. The words landed like a dropped glass. No one spoke. My contract never ended. My mortgage has always been paid. I was never in danger of losing my house. Ryan blinked. What? I made the whole story up. Mom looked genuinely stunned. Ethan, I know. It sounds awful. I lied. I'll own that. I nodded once, but I wasn't trying to get money. I wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. I wanted to answer one question. I looked around the room. When someone in this family appears to be struggling, who actually shows up? Nobody said a word. The silence wasn't angry. It was uncomfortable, heavy. My aunt slowly lowered her eyes. Dad rubbed his forehead. Ryan exhaled through his nose. Melissa looked like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. I opened the folder one last time. I only wrote down actions, not intentions, not excuses, just actions. Then I looked at the final page. There was only one person who called, checked in, showed up, brought food, sat with me, and tried to help without being asked. I lowered the paper. Without saying another word, I looked across the room. One by one, everyone else followed my eyes, until every face in the room turned toward Noah. Everyone looked at Noah. He looked completely caught off guard. His eyes moved from me to the rest of the table. What? He asked quietly. I smiled. I'm talking about you. He immediately shook his head. You don't have to do that. I do. I reached into the folder and pulled out the envelope he'd given me. I haven't spent any of it. I held it up. You brought groceries. You brought this. You sat in my kitchen. You asked how I was doing before you asked about my job. I looked around the room. That's all you did? I paused. And somehow, you were the only one. Noah rubbed the back of his neck and laughed nervously. I just figured that's what family does. Nobody answered. Not because the words were dramatic, because they were true. Mom spoke first. I honestly thought giving you space was the right thing. I didn't want to make you feel worse. I know, I said. I believe you. Dad nodded. I thought you'd tell us if you needed something. You've always handled things yourself. I probably assumed too much. Ryan finally looked at me. I should have called back. I kept putting it off because work got busy. Then it felt awkward. I never did. Melissa sighed. I thought you wanted privacy. I didn't know what to say. I know. And I meant it. Standing there, I didn't think anyone had chosen to ignore me. Life had simply become louder than someone else's problem. One delayed phone call became 2 weeks. One uncomfortable conversation became no conversation at all. It wasn't cruel, but it still hurt. I wasn't looking for perfect, I said. I wasn't asking anyone to solve my problems. I just wanted someone to knock on my door. Nobody argued. Dad walked over and hugged me. Not a dramatic hug. Just the kind a father gives when he doesn't know what else to do. I'm sorry, he said. That meant more than a long speech ever could. The mood never really recovered after that. People still talked, but more quietly. There were awkward pauses. Nobody seemed interested in defending themselves anymore. Before everyone left, Mom walked over to Noah. She hugged him, a real hug. Then she thanked him. He looked so surprised that he almost forgot to hug her back. Ryan smiled at him. You did good. Noah laughed. I made spaghetti. That was probably the first time I'd ever seen my family recognize him without turning it into a joke. As people grabbed their coats, Melissa stopped beside me. I can't fix this overnight. I'm not asking you to, but I'll do better. I nodded. So will I. I wasn't completely innocent either. I'd chosen an unusual way to find my answer. Outside, Noah and I walked to our cars together. After a minute, he smiled. You really had everybody fooled. I guess I did. You scared me. I know. Don't do that again. I won't. He unlocked his old pickup, then looked back at me. I'm just glad you're actually okay. That was it. No lecture, no complaint, just relief. I watched him drive away in the same old truck everyone liked to joke about. The person my family had underestimated for years turned out to be the only one who never stopped treating me like family. Things didn't become perfect after that. Ryan started calling more often. Melissa stopped by instead of only texting. Mom asked more questions. Dad still gave practical advice, but now he always finished with, "You doing okay?" People still got busy. We still missed calls. But something had changed. As for Noah, we became closer than ever. Not because of the money in that envelope, but because he showed me what showing up for someone really looks like. If you've made it this far, I'd love to hear what you think. Was my experiment unfair, or did my family need that wake-up call? And has someone ever surprised you by being there when the people you expected weren't?